I've been studying Hagar for 2 days, and I've studied her many times in the past, but not like this. So, for years, I have been in advocacy and journalism for things like domestic violence and more predominantly sex trafficking awareness and change and bills and laws and that sort of space. And when I tell you that is so real, 10 years ago it was real. And now it's even more real. It's always been real. And the story of Hagar takes me right back to how I feel when I sit with women like Hagar and hear their stories. So a lot of times in my office, I get people from safe houses. I get people that are sent to me by agencies, and I sit with people. And what I hear is a lot what I assume Hagar would say if she were given a voice to speak of how she felt about what happened to her. So here's the story, and it's one of the stories in the Bible that'll make you want to scratch your head unless you study it well enough. And even if you do, it's still a little bit of a head scratcher. It'll stretch your faith. So Abraham was going to be the father of nations, the Lord said. And Sarah was going to birth a baby. They were both old. And this was such a toxic relationship at this time because none of them really could take in what God was saying. Sarah was laughing about it, and she's so worried about it that she decides to pull a Jerry Springer and bring in another woman who really has no other say than she's a slave woman, and her job is now to birth a baby. I want you to think about that in context. Put that in context. Put yourself there. I think a lot of times it's easy for us to preach that Hagar was this man-made thing to make the promise of God come to pass, but Hagar was a real person. Hagar mattered. Hagar was a child of God. Hagar had a purpose. Hagar had a life. Hagar had a son. And she had dreams. So Hagar runs away, right? And she runs into the climate of the Middle East. And that had to be difficult. Not only that, but her social status was very low. And I can't imagine how she felt in the middle of that desert, or how her body felt, because that would be so harsh to survive in that kind of climate. But Hagar, like a lot of us, felt caught in the middle of something she had no control over. Do you ever feel caught in the middle of your mom and dad? Caught in the middle of your husband's anger? Caught in the middle of something at work that you couldn't control, but somehow it was your fault, but you didn't do anything? Just fill in the blank. Or maybe you had something worse happen to you that you couldn't control, and you were just caught in the middle of someone's desires and the ability to not be able to get away. I can understand that. So she runs away as a slave, and the Lord sends an angel to tell her to go back. And I studied this a minute, and I thought, why would you make her go back to a space where she is enslaved in an abusive, toxic love triangle? Why would we go back here? Here's the thing, is that God saw past Hagar's social status, and it had no prediction of the favor of God on her life. She didn't know that. So she goes back. But here's the thing. Scholars believe that if Hagar had kept going, she would ran into Egypt, which would have later had a future of violence and wrath. And a lot of people believe that God was keeping her from a worse fate. But what I see when I look at that as a theologian and then just as a little preacher is I see God keeping her from harm. But I also see God saying, trust me. Just trust me. After Sarah can't look at Hagar anymore, or her child, even though it's all her own fault, she sends her away. And even though she sends her away, the thing is, Hagar got her freedom, but she also got a covenant blessing. And I don't know how Sarah would have felt about that. Nor do I really care, because this is a side of the story we don't often preach. Here's the thing, is she was caught in the middle. She didn't have a say, but God did. And Hagar's social status could not predict the favor of God. She was a slave. She was then a ex-slave. Put an S on it. And at the end of the day, her social status didn't matter to God, because he saw her as a covenant woman, and he sent her away as such. Here's the thing, is God may know that Egypt is ahead of you. And sometimes you may not know why you're still stuck in this place. Now, if you're stuck somewhere that's not safe, I don't mean that space. I mean spaces in life where you don't know how to get out and you don't know the next move. All you know is that you're stuck in the middle of a rock in a hard place. The Lord is going to meet you in the runaway places. The Lord is going to meet you in the faraway places. And the Lord is going to bring you back. Like the Bible says, he's going to bring your sons from afar. My friend Roy Lesin sent me that book one time when I was young, and I didn't understand why. He wrote it. Roy is the co-founder of Dayspring. And I remember at the time not understanding why Roy sent me this book, because my children were babies. But as I got older and my children got older, I watched my sons return from afar. God is the God of the far-off place. You need to know that. And maybe you're watching me and you are caught in something like Hagar. Or maybe you're watching me and you just know what it's like to not have a say, and to not know why you're still here, to want to run away, to figure it out yourself. And I'm praying that the Lord sends his very best angels to sit with you, to direct you, to guide you. And I pray that the Lord gives you favor with man and favor with God. You're going to go away with a covenant blessing, because your social status does not predict favor. Nor does your current scenario predict his goodness. I don't know where you are or what's happening in your life today, but I want you to remember that he will always meet you in the runaway places. He is the God of far off. He's the God that comes up close, and he's the God that has not forgotten you. My prayer is this, that today, that you remember that the Lord loves you, and that even when you're stuck in the middle, God always leads you out. There's always a way, and God will give you the covenant blessing that you've been asking for and that you deserve. The Lord is not slow to act on his promises, as some deem slow. And sometimes that's justice. And sometimes the justice is simply you get a covenant blessing, and everybody has to watch you walk away with it. There's pretty things inside this life, you know. Even Hagar's. Even yours. You just have to look a little closer.